Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the best Lohse build in Divinity Original Sin 2. This is going to be focused around Warfare and Polymorph. We'll be going with a physical damage setup. I'll be doing an elemental one in the future, as I got a team here with Ifen being a range attacker, Fane as a necromancer melee attacker, and Seville as a rogue type scoundrel build. This one works great because she's more, I feel like, of a support style character, but can also hold her own in combat. We'll be mostly working on debuffs, a bit of damage, and overall survivability to keep herself alive. The nice thing is, this is the only build on the team that uses a shield, as it gives us some extra survivability with shields up, deflect a barrier, as well we can also use bouncing shield to get a bit of DPS. The other nice thing is using Polymorph, we can also use Medusa head, and I feel like this fits very well with Lohse, so this is great. And typically we want to be using bouncing shield as often as possible because it can sometimes bounce around doing a bit of extra damage on enemies. And for a polymorph skill, it's either bullheads or going with the Medusa head here, as Medusa head can be really great for just the crowd control that it brings. And we also got some burst damage. Having battering ram and battle stomp are great for the crowd control that they bring, as well as adrenaline's very nice on this build as well because that lets us get ourselves some more burst damage. I'd recommend using battering ram again for like kind of mobility, and then you can go in and use things like tentacle lash or chicken's claw if we're able to reduce the enemy's armor values. And what's great about that is if you have ruptured tendons from a scoundrel, you can go ahead with a chicken claw, and that ends up being pretty funny. So pretty much every turn that you can use bouncing shield is kind of the best idea if there's multiple enemies in an area. And then otherwise, deflect a barrier if there's an enemy that's going to be using range attacks can be great because you can use this to then reflect them back, although the enemy's AI may respawn. And honestly, due to the way that combat works in Divinity Original Sin 2, it's sometimes best to just burst down an enemy and crowd control them as much as you can and kind of hold your attention on that target, while your other teammates are on another target. But overall, I think it's best to focus on keeping her as like your character that you keep alive through it. Everything, just focus on maybe healing them or some other form of crowd control just to keep things all right. Now, as far as our attributes go, I do think that a strength-based build will be a good choice because this is going to be our best version of DPS, and it just gives us the stats that we want to be able to deal a lot of damage and also be able to spread things around. Now, you don't have to put as many points into our strength as you can also put some points into constitution. Unfortunately, I have a couple pieces of gear that do require 12 finesse here, and I don't have any other finesse-based gear, so I'd have 2 points in here, but ideally you wouldn't have those 2 points. You'd have it in your strength. I like having around 30 at around level 10 here, and then putting the rest of the points, a few into memory so you can equip the skills that we need. I typically find that only like a couple points here works fine, and then you can also use a talent to give us even further ones. And then constitution is great too because this will just give us a lot more health, which is important because we try to stay alive when everyone else is dropping, and with that, we can just keep everyone safe. And as far as our abilities go, Warfare is typically going to be, if we're doing a physical team, this is just the best way to go about doing that because it increases all of the physical damage we'll be dealing. I also like to have at least 1 point into Scoundrel, just because we can then take the Pawn if we want to have a bit of extra movement. It's good to have Executioner, but I do think Pawn works better on Seville and Lohse here because getting that extra movement speed is huge on a melee-style character. Also going with 1 point in Arrow Third, you can take a second one here. Having some teleportation skills is really nice. The hydrosophist is also great if you want to do a bit of healing. I just don't think that it's fully necessary within the confines. This is a build for tactician, so if you like to have some healing, you can put a couple of your warfare points into hydrosophist, but I like to have the arrow thirds there so that you can have some teleportation. A bit of necromancer is nice as well, so you can get some heal and sustain. I think this is important on a lot of different physical style builds because this just gives you the ability to sustain yourself into the later areas of the game, and even just 2 points into that is great to unlock some skills. Polymorph as well as being a big focus of this. We only really need 2 points at this current moment, but as we get later on in the game, it's nice to take a bit more points. This does give you additional attribute points, which we'll be putting into Constitution. You can take points into your weapon skills, but I don't think they're very necessary. Ideally, we'd try to get the Warfare up to 10 as early as possible, taking a couple points of Scoundrel so that we can take the Pawn, as well as also getting our Adrenaline skill, which is very important for the setup, Arrow Third, Necromancer, and then if you want, you can take Hydrosophist. I mentioned it again, having the Pawn on here is nice. If you have Executioner, that's good, but I think it's better to have 2 people on your team with Executioner, 2 with Pawn, and you can kind of set it up so that certain people are going to get the knockouts. Lohse is going to have a bit lower damage than the other characters, but on this setup, she's going to survive the longest, which is important that she has good mobility. The Opportunist is great too because we're going to be getting in close, so you can give yourself those attacks of opportunity for just a good spike to your damage. Anytime we can weaponize our defensive phase, it's good to have. Mnemonic here is great for the extra memory attributes so that we can store more skills, as I like to have a lot of skills on here, but also have it so that we have a decent bit of health. Not necessary to take that. And we can get a decent amount of survivability here. Since we're using a shield, Hothead works really well because when we're at maximum vitality, which will often be, this gives us 10% critical hit chance, which is great because that's just going to boost our overall damage. We'll get to gear in a moment, but I like to go with something that also has critical hit chance. Alternatively, Glass Cannon can kind of work, even though this is more of a tanky build. It will draw people's aggro towards you a bit more. Living Armor can also work great, giving 35% of all healing you receive by skills or consumables to your magic armor, helping us stay alive longer. And if you don't want Mnemonic, the Picture of Health is really great because at every point into our warfare, we get 3% extra vitality, which is really good because we have 12 currently. So this would be the later of Act 2, where we'd want to have our Hothead Opportunist Picture of Health, since we'll have higher warfare at this moment. But as mentioned, Mnemonic can be great too, because this will prepare more abilities and skills for you. And then the Pawn. I guess also mentioned that we can take 1 point out of the Scoundrel here, and also a Necromancer, and put those 2 points to the hydrosophist. This will give us those healing spells that may be great. It's personal preference if you like healing or not. As this will let us take the Healing Ritual skill here, which can restore 97 vitality at this level, and it will chain around and also heal each other. And then we also have Restoration here, which you can restore a target character, which will cure the poison and bleeding, and does heal them over time. And it's only 1 action point cost, so these two are nice to have. Soothing Cold is also pretty useful because it'll regenerate your magic armor. This can be good in certain fights, so you can save and bring it on. And even things like Armor Frost can be decent as well. But I also like to have the Warfare skills Battle Stomp here, which again is crowd control. This is one of the best skills in the game, so we're going to use it. And then Deflect a Barrier is great because if there's a lot of projectile heavy enemies, you can pop this up. It'll give you physical armor and it'll deflect for 3 turns, which is great since we got a shield. Then we can also use the Bouncing Shield as mentioned. This is going to scale off of our shield damage, so or shield level. So this is something that we want to have a up-to-date shield with. And we'll also take Phoenix Dive for a bit of mobility. This is a 1 action point cost, so this is great to give yourself a setup if you need to go to higher ground. And we also got the Battering Ram here from our items. It's good to have this and Battle Stomp. These are going to be our main crowd control based spells. But we also got some really nice ones from the Polymorph here. So Tentacle Lash, actually a very powerful skill because it'll set a trophy on the enemy. It does actually pretty high damage. Once their physical armor is broken down, we can basically make it so they can't use their weapon skills and they become not so offensively focused. We also have Spread Your Wings. This will give you some mobility, which is nice if there's surfaces on the ground. I always like to have this one prepared at some point because, yeah, it's not compatible with spider legs, but this is great. Heart of Steel is good too. This will give you physical armor, and then you restore it for 4 turns. So this is another one that's going to give us a lot of sustain. So we got sustain and healing, but also great crowd control. And then also Medusa Head here. This is one that I think is really powerful because it gives you the Petrifying Visage skill. And since we're not using bull horns, this can work well. And then Chicken Claw. Once you got an enemy's armor value reduced, and it's better if you have a rogue that can use the if they got Rupture Tendon skill, because this will make the target run around quite a bit and they'll take a bunch of extra damage. Now, Lohse's song here, Maddening Song's pretty good because it'll madden enemies, which will make them attack the nearest enemy. It does have a decent cost, and it has to make sure that the target has no magic armor. So this is good if there's a target that just doesn't have any magic armor. You can use this pretty freely, but the Encourage ability is something that Iphon also has, and it's kind of nice because it's going to buff up your team with a single action point cost. And since we got a shield, we also have the Shields Up ability, which will restore your shields if you need something a little bit more sustained focus. So this can be good if you're playing more defensively. So our Warfare skills are just for overall damage and mobility. We have our Polymorph for just general utility and being able to debuff. And then we got our Hydrosophist skills for a bit of healing here just to provide benefits for the team. And as far as gear goes, I mentioned that I put 2 points to Finesse. This gave me this item here. Finesse is okay. I'd rather go strength-based for this setup, but this one had 2 at Warfare, so I couldn't deny using this. You want to look for gear that's going to give us strength, that is going to be our main DPS skill, and you also want to get Warfare. It is nice if you can get some points into like Necromancer or Hydrosophist, so you get some better healing and sustain, but typically we're going to be looking for the Warfare. I got 2 rings here plus 2 Warfare, pretty crazy roll. This one also comes with a bit of extra health and Pyrokinetic. There are some Pyrokinetic skills that can work on here, but I don't love using them too much. I think she's better off focusing on being more of a support style class and less of a burst damage. But our weapon, I got the Huntsman here. We want to find one that's got silence, as I like having both our rogue and our kind of support character having silence on their blade because they can focus on the spellcaster as well as still providing benefits to the team. I would have liked to have critical hit chance. There are some other weapons that I do have. Like you can get some maces. This one gives us an additional critical hit chance. You don't need to use a shield, but I like having one on the setup. You could even go with like a dagger in your main hand and a one-handed sword in the offhand, although this is going to scale off of our finesse. This will give us a bit of extra damage on backstabs and also lifesteal. And you could even go with something like a spear if you want a bit of extra reach, but I went with a sword or an axe for the most part. And then also with the shield, look for things that's going to give you more constitution. This one has reflect 40% of melee damage as physical damage, which is pretty crazy. Since we're all on a physical build, this is typically what you would like to look for. Now, as far as combat goes, typically our #1 role is crowd control, and if there's anyone that's like near death, it's probably best to focus on giving them a bit of sustain here. So this target here is just in our prime position, so I'm going to go with a bouncing. Actually, it's probably best to crowd control them with something like our battering ram. This is good for mobility and the crowd control because you can then knock the target down, which is ideal. And then we can follow up with something like tentacle lash if they need to reduce the damage they deal with a weapon, or we can just simply go with a normal based attack here if we want to save our cooldowns for something else. And with things like Phoenix Dive giving us extra mobility, we also have things like Adrenaline here if we wanted to go burst on our damage, or even Spread Your Wings for a bit of momentum. Nether Swap being a fun one too, because you can use this to make targets swap places. So if you want to have an easier target come into zone here, you can use this to move things around so that you can focus on maybe this target's got all the debuffs it needs. He tried to run away from us and got the opportunity attack from our talent there, which is great because now when our Fane's attacking, this target's going to end up getting downed. One of the best things though is all the versatility that this brings. So if we want to stay at range, we can use Bouncing Shield, or again, the moment that physical armor is down, we're going to go in for the crowd control because it's kind of the best thing that we can do. What's even funnier is, again, if you got the Rupture Tendons into Chicken Claw, that's a really fun combo, but even Tentacle Lash can be great to prevent them from doing any extra damage towards us. And again, I like this build because she kind of provides a bit of the tankiness, having the most health and shields on the team, whereas with Sybil here, being able to do the roguish kind of build where you go in and silence any spellcasters and just run around going for backstabs. Ifan's kind of a ranged attacker with his summon, and then Fane going with a full Necromancer build. So this is the full physical team. I'll do a full video on like a full team build, as well as switching over, as I think Lohse actually fits a bit more of an elemental style build, but typically you want to have your entire team aligned. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed, and I hope you guys all have a great day.